Here we are once again to tear apart the notion that the world owes you anything, with even more stories of bizarre and tragic deaths. The following stories are real and contain descriptions of tragic events. Viewer discretion is advised, and just as a little pre-warning, animal lovers might get a little skeeved by story number 4. Or maybe they'll love it, I don't know. These are bad ways to go. John Anderson was a train conductor for Union Pacific in 2011. He was on a train traveling eastbound near Utah's Spanish Fork Canyon. He was joined by another train conductor, Michael, and as the two looked forward on the track, they noticed something strange. At first, both men tried to come to terms with what they were seeing on the train tracks, but as they came to the realization that yes, what they saw was truly there, they began to panic. Michael began blaring the horn of the train, and John was shouting as loud as he could out the window in order to prevent the terrible thing that was about to happen from happening. But it was too late. Trains traveling at around 55 miles per hour can take nearly a mile to come to a complete stop, and this train didn't have that kind of time or distance. The tragedy that both John and Michael were trying so desperately to prevent happened. As that train was barreling down the tracks that day, 3 girls, Essa Ricker, Kelsey Webster, and Kelsey's little sister Savannah, were standing on the train tracks. But they weren't just standing there. The 3 were taking a selfie. In fact, Savannah, the youngest of the 3 girls, posted on her Facebook, "Standing right by a train. This is awesome." Moments before tragedy quite literally struck. The 3 girls, too engrossed in taking their selfie to notice that there was actually a train headed straight for them, were hit by the locomotive, which proceeded to coast for another quarter mile after striking the girls before coming to a complete stop. Essa and Kelsey were both killed on impact. However, Savannah survived for a short time with major injuries, but later died in the hospital. In addition to the families of the girls, both John and Michael, the 2 train conductors that day, were devastated by what they had experienced. Michael is quoted as saying, "What happened was very intense, and I have to carry it the rest of my life." Years after the girls were killed, Union Pacific released the final selfie taken by the girls on the railroad tracks, moments before they were struck by the train. And along with this haunting selfie was an article detailing the events and trying to deter any from doing the same thing. They even released 2 animated YouTube videos as a PSA against taking selfies on railroad tracks.
Deuces!
Ooh, hey girl!
OMG, sick selfie.
Hey, get off the field!
Oh, this is so lit. So savage.
Believe it or not, deaths on train tracks due to people taking selfies are more common than you would think. But it should go without saying that no selfie is worth your life. Propylene is a gas that is typically stored as a flammable liquid under pressure that is typically used to make gasoline. On July 11, 1978 at 10:15 a.m. in Tarragona, Spain, a tanker being driven by 50-year-old Francisco Villena arrived at a state-owned oil refinery in order to load up on liquid propylene. Francisco's job was to drive the tanker from the refinery to the Ciudad Real to drop off the load. On this journey, which was quite lengthy, he would be alone, rather than have a co-driver, which was how these deliveries were usually done. But Francisco was prepared for the long drive alone regardless. By around noon, the tanker was filled with the flammable liquid. Actually, it was overfilled by 4 tons, but this was common practice for propylene deliveries at the time. Before he left the refinery, Francisco was instructed to take the more narrow, winding coastal roads known as the N340, which passed many dense urban areas, rather than the more spacious A7 road. Francisco left the refinery in the tanker a little after 12 p.m. As Francisco drove, the summer temperature rose higher and higher, to around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The rising temperature and the overfilled tank slowly started to build pressure within the tanker. At this same time, the tanker was passing near the Los Alfaques campsite, a popular tourist destination with almost 1,000 guests. Unbeknownst to Francisco, and due to the tankers at the time not having any safety valves, the gas began leaking out of the tanker. The exact order and details of the events that happened next are not confirmed. Some believe the leaking gas caused a spare tire to become dislodged, which caused Francisco to lose control of the tanker. In any case, the tanker ran off the road into a ditch and slammed into the wall of the Los Alfaques campsite, which ejected a large plume of gasified propylene into the air. The gas mixing with air ignited, causing a massive explosion. The damage caused by this explosion was catastrophic to say the least. Entire families were reported to have been blown away by the blast. Some victims were blown 150 yards away into the sea due to the explosion. It's estimated that nearly 200 people were killed, with 200 more suffering severe injuries and burns. Those who suffered burns initially attempted to run to the sea, but the explosion had caused the temperature of the nearby water to rise so rapidly that those who attempted to jump into the water to ease their burns were boiled alive. Responding officers report saying that it looked like a scene from hell. This tragedy was so bad, it initiated new legislation in Spain regarding how dangerous and flammable materials were carried and delivered. A policeman who was early on the scene after the explosion is quoted as saying, "I'll never be able to get rid of these horrible sights, no matter how long I live." Before we get into this next story, some context would help understand it a little bit better. A diving bell, put somewhat simply, is a chamber that's used to transport divers from the surface of the water to various depths below the water, typically for the purposes of performing underwater work or maintenance before getting transferred to a decompression chamber after the dive is over. The decompression allows the body to expel the nitrogen that is built up in the bloodstream during a deep dive. For divers who spend a lot of time underwater doing this kind of work, their blood becomes so full of nitrogen it can't absorb any more. This is why they are called saturation divers. A closed bell, which as the name suggests is enclosed during submersion, maintains a greater internal pressure than what is outside in order to keep the divers inside safe. Typically at the bottom of the closed diving bells, there's a hatch which allows the divers to exit the bell to do their work. The bell would typically be connected to other chambers where the divers would stay via a trunk, which had a clamp which would be used to adjust the pressure within the bell. This explanation is almost over, I promise, but it'll pay off when you're listening to the story. Now, in order to safely move from the bell through the trunk and into the chambers, the following procedure would need to be followed. First, the diving bell door would need to be closed. The pressure in the diving bell would then need to be raised in order to ensure a tight seal on the door. The door that connects the trunk to the chambers would need to be sealed. The trunk would need to be depressurized, and then finally, the clamp would be opened, which would separate the diving bell from the chamber system. If these steps weren't followed, it could cause instant decompression. On Saturday, November 5th, 1983, at 4 a.m., 4 divers were inside of a diving chamber system attached to a dive bell connected to a drilling rig known as the Byford Dolphin in the North Sea. The 4 divers were taking part in a routine procedure, and 2 of the 4 divers were safely in one of the living chambers attached to the diving bell. They had another diver assisting them with the clamp that connected the diving bell to the trunk and the living chambers. 2 more divers had to make their way from the bell to the living chambers. Typically, the dive bell would not be detached from the living chambers until the doors were completely sealed. However, due to what would later turn out to be a malfunction in the dive bell and clamp system, the dive bell was detached before the chamber doors were closed, creating an explosive decompression. The pressure inside the chamber went from 9 atmospheres being the amount of pressure that is experienced when hundreds of feet below the surface of the water, to 1. This created an explosive rush of air from the chamber, which caused the dive bell to go flying, killing the diver operating the clamp. Inside the chambers, the 4 divers suffered an arguably worse fate. The men inside the chamber had been on this deep dive long enough for nitrogen to build up in their blood. Due to the change in pressure, the nitrogen in their blood began to erupt into gas bubbles, which essentially caused the men to boil from the inside out. This was instant death. To get an idea what this internal boiling does to the body, there are pictures of the remains of one of the men online. But due to the very grisly nature of these photos, I will not show them here. If you are so inclined, I'm sure you'll be able to find them. The diving bell tragedy at the Byford Dolphin is considered one of the worst oil field disasters in history, and changed the way safety is assessed when it comes to performing commercial dives. Sean McDonnell was a bus driver living in Ireland and a father of 3 in 2008. But in addition to being a bus driver, Sean had a lot of other stuff going on. It turns out Sean was very into pornography. Within a 5-month period, Sean had 1.5 million hits on various porn sites. But the most notable one for the purpose of this video was his interest in bestiality. Essentially, sex acts with animals. He was even part of message boards where individuals could discuss these desires with others, and meet people who shared this mutual interest. That is where Sean met a 43-year-old woman and mother of 4 who was also into bestiality. After chatting in this fetish chat room for some time, the two decided that they would meet. The purpose of meeting was for the two of them to engage in sexual activity with Sean's German Shepherd. Upon arriving, the 43-year-old woman proceeded to perform a sex act with Sean's German Shepherd, with Sean supervising and instructing the dog. After that no doubt exciting afternoon, that woman returned home. Later that evening, however, at around 7:30 p.m., the woman started exhibiting signs of anaphylaxis, which is usually seen in severe food allergies, such as peanut allergies. It can cause hives, swelling in the throat and neck, and severe shortness of breath and tightening of the throat. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. By around 8 p.m. that evening, she'd passed away. At first, there was a lot of confusion as to what could have caused this seemingly bizarre death. But, as you've probably put together already, the 43-year-old unnamed woman was allergic to dogs. Her dog allergy was severely triggered upon the sex act she performed with the German Shepherd earlier, which caused the anaphylaxis and her subsequent death. The story continues, though, because after authorities found out what happened, they found Sean, the owner of the dog who facilitated and arranged for the woman and Fido to have their conjugal visit, and he was actually charged with what is known in Ireland as buggery. Buggery, from the Buggery Act, which was passed during the reign of Henry VIII, was interpreted by the courts to essentially contain laws against bestiality. Due to this, Sean was sentenced to 3 years in prison and had his name added to the sex offender registry for 5 years. Due to the publicity around the case, and probably just how embarrassing all this shit was, Sean and his family eventually emigrated out of the country. This is Remy Lucidi. Remy was a French daredevil known for extreme stunts, which he would frequently post on social media. He would climb high-rises, walk on the edge of massive structures with no protective equipment or harnesses, and had pictures of him at the highest points of the tallest buildings in Dubai, Bulgaria, and France. This garnered him quite a bit of attention and following on the internet. On Thursday, July 27th, Remy was in Hong Kong for his latest stunt, which he was going to photograph and broadcast on social media. His plan was to scale the Tregunter Tower No. 3. The Tregunter Towers in Hong Kong are massive residential apartment buildings, with Tregunter 3 being the tallest of the 3, by a significant margin. In fact, for a period of time, Tregunter 3 held the record for the world's tallest all-residential building. Now, before Remy could actually get on the building to start taking his pictures and doing his stunts, he first needed to access the building. The buildings that are climbed by these Instagram stunt influencers typically do not like individuals doing their stunts on their buildings, for a whole host of liability-related reasons. And so, Remy told the security guard at the front of Tregunter Tower 3 that he was there to visit a friend on the 40th floor. This, of course, wasn't true. Remy just wanted access to the building, but the security guard bought it, and now Remy had access to the building. Immediately, he took the elevator up to the top floor and managed to access the roof of Tregunter 3 by forcing the door open. Once on the roof, he got his camera equipment out and began to slowly scale down the side of the building. At 7:30 p.m., a maid that was working on the 68th floor of a penthouse in the Tregunter Tower heard a knocking sound coming from the window. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was in her head or perhaps someone messing around. But as the knocking grew louder and seemingly more frantic, the maid went to investigate and was shocked to see a man outside the penthouse window repeatedly knocking. This startled the maid, who ran to go get help, but when she returned, the individual outside of the window was gone. A little while later, police were called to investigate a gas leak at a nearby apartment building located very close to the Tregunter Towers. When the police arrived, they started trying to find the cause of the gas leak. What they found instead was the body of a male that they determined fell from the Tregunter Towers and destroyed a gas pipe on impact. The body was Remy Lucidi. Although it isn't 100% clear what exactly unfolded on the side of the building, the running theory is that Remy began to descend on the side of the building, taking pictures as he went. When he got outside the 68th floor penthouse, something had gone wrong, and he knew he needed to get inside right away. Some think he might have lost his footing and was having trouble regaining it. Some think he may have gotten injured. But whatever the case was, Remy knew he needed to get inside as soon as possible, otherwise he would fall to his death. So he started banging on the window, which got the attention of the maid. But it was too late, and Remy slipped off the side of the building and fell nearly 700 feet to his death. When the news of Remy's death broke, many took to social media to express condolences. To this day, scaling buildings and taking pictures on social media, also known as rooftopping, is a popular but extremely dangerous way to achieve internet fame, a price that some pay with their lives. I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, since these videos are usually really heavy in nature, I'll compensate by putting some cute animal footage for you to enjoy. No dog footage though, wouldn't want you to enjoy it too much, right? Okay, well that's it. Shameless self-promotion, I do have a Patreon. I have one tier, it is $1. You can support me by becoming a member of that tier, and by doing so you get early access to my videos and some other special bonus updates and content. If that is far too much for you, you can simply click like and subscribe, and I'll know that you enjoy my videos. Other than that, be safe, I'll see you in the next one.